actor, you know.
Oh dear. Yeah, I I started to think about what you might ask me about Drybroughs, and I tried to reach out to the two or three ex-Drybrough brewers that are still alive, and I haven't been able to contact any of them.
Mm.
So um, uh, there is another brewer who I think is away on holiday at the moment. Who, if you ask me something I can't answer, I might get back to you in a few days. Having managed, I know where he is, but the other ones I've lost contact. So,
Okay, well that's fine. Getting back to me is perfectly good.
a
I'm not in a
few
rush.
a few have died as well, which is just the passage of time, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So which years were you at Drybrough?
I started on Monday, July the 13th, I think it was, in 1979.
Okay.
And, and I left on the 31st of December, 1982.
Okay, so you were there fairly briefly.
Fairly briefly, I'm one of these people who I was very, I'm not bragging, Ron, but I was pretty quick on the uptake. I'd done quite a lot of holiday jobs as students, and uh, when I when I started full time working in the brewing industry, I was pretty good at separating goats from sheep, and I was pretty good at sort of working out what what was obviously good practice and what needed a little bit of tweaking. And as a result of that, I moved from packaging supervisor to process brewer to brewhouse and fermentation manager in that period, more or less.
Okay, so that's quite quick.
It was all quite quick. Now, the really interesting bit was brewhouse and fermentation manager. They actually delayered at that time. And so the production and distribution director became the production director and head brewer. So they actually took the head brewer's job out. Now, he was such seniority that the idea of doing lots of things that the head brewer should have done was just totally beneath him. So the nearest brewer to his office was the brewhouse and fermentation manager, which was me. So I ended up doing probably about between a quarter and a third of what should have been the head brewer's job as well.
Okay.
And of course, I was the kind of person who I really enjoyed responsibility because to me it was just all a learning experience. And so they wanted me to move to London to Truman's because Truman's had a big problem, a big quality problem. They had an infection which basically virtually shut the brewery down. And they wanted to bring a whole new crop of managers in from elsewhere in the group. So they offered me the job in London, which was the same job I was doing in Edinburgh, but without the sort of added head brewer responsibilities. And it was a shift job. So that kind of prompted me to leave because I didn't really want to carry on doing the same job but on shift and with slightly less responsibility. It seemed like a backward step. So I actually left and joined Associated Dairies for, as it turned out, only 16 months, because I don't know if you know this, Ron, but processing milk is an awful lot less fun than making beer. And I got fairly bored fairly quickly. The most exciting thing we made was chocolate milk. Other than that, we were the biggest computerized skim milk dairy in Europe, but that just, and that satisfied the sort of the computer process control side of me. But other than that, it just didn't do anything. So after 16 months, a detergent salesman said, I thought you would have been applying for the Mansfield brewery job. And I hadn't been looking at the job adverts. And so I said, no, I don't know anything about it. So I went home, opened up the brewer because I was still in the guild, and saw this advert, and I thought, that sounds like a really good job. So I went for the interview, and of course, the dairy was APV, ACOS 1 computer controlled, and Mansfield Brewery was, I don't know if you know anything about Mansfield Brewery, but it was the biggest computer controlled brewhouse in Europe at the time. Little family owned regional English brewery.
Yeah.
But the biggest computer controlled brewhouse in Europe. And it was ACOS, APV ACOS 2. So I was, I think, the only person who applied for a job who had previous computer process control experience. So I got the job. And it was easily the best brewery and the best place I ever worked. Mansfield Brewery employed people very much like me, people who were very motivated and had a good sort of feel for the job.
Yeah.
And the reason for having the biggest computerized brewhouse is they said, well, why do we want to work on shifts when we've employed all these guys who we reckon are very capable? So we'll just do everything 9 to 5. Well, as it actually was 7 till 6. But for the majority of the time, the senior departmental managers were on site in charge, rather than having a shift brewer on the day shift, back shift, and night shift. And it worked extremely well. We had a highly motivated staff. The atmosphere was brilliant. The industrial relations were absolutely superb. And the beer was pretty good. I mean, we won Supreme Championship for the lager. Now, there's another funny thing. Regional family-owned English brewery winning Supreme Championship at the BIIA, not once, but twice. No other brewery anywhere in the world has ever won a Supreme Championship at the BIIA twice. And
Interesting.
that was for lager. Anyway, back to Drybrough's.
Yeah,
what do you want to know?
Well, a lot of stuff about the continuous fermentation system.
Right. Okay. It was the Bishop system. It was the New Zealand cascade system. So you had 3 vessels. Well, feeding into the first vessel, you had a long glass U-tube, and the wort went up the U-tube and back down, and it was oxygenated as it went up the U-tube. And the U-tube was just a way of trying to get the oxygen to go into solution as efficiently as possible. So the wort was oxygenated to 20 parts per million, which is quite high. But the continuous fermentation was quite vigorous, so it needed that extra oxygen. Because of the high oxygen and the temperature and the stirring, the first 2 vessels were stirred. You actually produced a little bit more yeast than you would do in a batch fermentation. So the losses were slightly higher because you were creating more yeast. So in the 3rd vessel, basically that was a cooling vessel. So the first 2 vessels were stirred fermenters, cascading from one to the other. 3rd vessel was a very steep cone. So the included angle at the bottom, I would have said 30 degrees. So it was a very sharp, a very long, sharp cone. And the beer came in at the top cylindrical portion of that cone, and the cooling coils on the conical section very quickly separated what was now the beer from the yeast. And so you had a baffled outlet for the beer. The yeast came out the bottom of the cone, and CO2 blew off the top. Now, we didn't collect the CO2, but it would have been a very efficient way of collecting CO2 and compressing it and reusing it for somewhere in the brewery, but we didn't. As far as I know, it was I know it was the only commercial continuous fermenter in Scotland, and I think I'm not sure of the numbers now, but I think there was about 8 in the UK. Well, there was one in Cork, Murphy's.
Yeah, well, I know about the 4 ones that Watney's had, because there's a really good Journal of the Institute of Brewing article from Mr. Bishop, and it says which ones they were. So it was Drybrough, Murphy's, Mortlake and Mile End.
Ah, right. I knew the Mortlake one because I actually saw it when I first started with Watney Man and Truman. I was briefly at Truman's and at Mortlake, and I remember seeing the one at Mortlake, but I don't think it was working by that stage. So the only one I ever worked on was the only one that I think was still working at that time, which was at Drybrough's.
Yeah, because I know I've been trying to work out exactly who had the fermenters, because looking at the numbers that's in this article, you can see that, because it says about the percentage that the capacity at Watney's and what percentage of UK beer was using conical fermenters, and it looks like that between 50 and half and 3/4 was from Watney's.
So, I mean, what we had at Drybrough's was a Steinecker brewhouse, which was the first Steinecker brewhouse to be imported into the UK. And again, that's all part and parcel of Watney's innovative culture. As far as I remember, the batch cylindroconical vessels were Steinecker as well. So it was all part of a package, brewhouse and fermentation vessels. And I think, I may be wrong, but I think that Steinecker was imported in 68.
Okay.
Which seems like an awful long time ago, but I think that's right. Because it was, by the time I inherited it, I was having to carry out fairly major repairs on the steam jackets, particularly on the kettle. So that would seem to be about right.
So was that a 3-vessel system?
Now you've asked a question. Originally, it was a 3-vessel system. Yeah, mash mixing vessel, Lauterton and kettle. But you may or may not know that Drybrough's was quite famous for barley brewing.
No.
Right. Gosh, was it Palmer? Ian Palmer? John Palmer. John Palmer was a Watney Man Truman project brewer, development brewer. And he was sent up to Drybrough's to, I mean, Drybrough's was an interesting place because it was very much the sort of test bed for new ideas and for new equipment. And John Palmer was sent to set up barley brewing. And it quickly became apparent that if you wanted to brew with a reasonable amount of barley, you really need to program mash. Decoction mashing was not really considered a serious option. So the idea was we would have to program mash. And the only way we could do that efficiently would be to have a second mash mixing vessel. So we would wet mill into the mash mixing vessel, and after the first part of the program mash, we transfer to what we call the conversion vessel, which was actually just a copy of the mash mixing vessel, and then transfer from there to the lauter tun. And that would allow us to do a fairly long program mash conversion. So in actual fact, and this is going to horrify you, Ron, for about 6 months, the production director, who, as I said, kind of abdicated a lot of his head brewer responsibilities to me, encouraged me to brew with 60% barley.
Mm.
So that was 35% malt, 5% sugar, and 60% barley. And bear in mind, because of the continuous fermenter, we were sending batch fermentation heavy, 70 shilling or keg heavy, and continuous keg heavy to London every month. So for 6 months, we were sending 60% barley brewed beer to London, and the central taste test panel were tasting this beer, and no one was raising an eyebrow. So the beer ticked all the boxes. But when the central quality control manager, Dr. Button, I think he started out life with Mars chocolate.
Okay.
He ended up as central quality control manager for Watney and Truman. When he discovered that I was brewing with 60% barley, he immediately stopped me, and I had to brew with less than 50%. So, so that I sort of redeemed myself, we went back to 50% malt, 45% barley, and 5% sugar. And again, no one spotted the difference.